Today we're putting Nvidia's brand new RTX 5070 up against the still popular RTX 3080 to see how much of a generational leap you're actually getting in Warzone Verdansk. Both cards target high performance at 1440, but is the upgrade really worth it? Let's break it down. I paired both GPUs with a 9800X3D running a plus 200 boost clock override and a minus 40 undervolt. I used 64 gigs of DDR5 at 6000 CL30 with tightened secondary and tertiary timings on an Aorus Extreme X670E motherboard. To see the tune in full detail, check out the video linked in the upper right hand corner. To really push the GPUs, I used the high graphics preset across all resolutions, 1080, 1440, and 4K native, and then in 4K with DLSS. I used my usual route for testing. I dropped into the dam area of Verdansk and followed the same path. I did 3 runs per resolution and used those averages for comparison. So let's jump into the numbers. Starting with 1080, the RTX 5070 clearly pulls ahead, showing a 22.5% increase in average FPS over the 3080. What's more impressive is the uplift in frame stability. 1% lows are 37.8% higher and 0.1% lows see a 26.8% boost, making for a much smoother and more consistent experience, especially during intense fights. In 1440, the gap narrows a bit, but the 5070 still maintains a healthy lead. Average FPS is up by 11.7% with 15.5 stronger 1% lows and a 12.3% gain in 0.1% lows. These improvements are noticeable in responsiveness and reduced stutter, especially when aiming or rotating quickly. In native 4K, the generational difference is still present. The 5070 delivers 10.1% higher average FPS while also improving 1% lows by 14.6% and 0.1% lows by 17.6%. While both cards can handle 4K decently well, the 5070 provides a bit more breathing room in heavier scenes. With DLSS enabled at 4K, the performance difference starts to shrink again. The 5070 still comes out on top, but with smaller margins. 5.3% better average, 13.2% better 1% lows, and a 10.6% uplift in 0.1% lows. If you're already relying on DLSS, the upgrade is more about smoothing out the lows than chasing raw frame rates. Compared to Temps and power draw, across all testing, the 5070 averaged just 156 watts of power draw while maintaining a cool 58 degrees Celsius under load. In comparison, the 3080 pulled nearly double the power at 297 watts with an average temperature of 63 degrees. Not only does the 5070 deliver better performance in Warzone, but it also does this while running cooler and significantly more efficiently. It's worth noting that the 3080 used in this test is a launch day Founders Edition, and at this point it could probably benefit from a repaste, which might explain the slightly elevated temps. Still, the power efficiency gains from the newer architecture are hard to ignore. The 5070 is clearly more performance per watt optimized. So if you're building or upgrading your rig specifically for Warzone, how do these two cards stack up in terms of value? The 5070 is actually often available around its $550 MSRP, though availability can vary a bit. The 3080 10GB on the other hand is regularly being sold for around $400, so the 5070 ends up costing around 1.5 times more than a 3080. Now in terms of performance, do you get 1.5 times more frames? Not really. You get about a 10 to 20% uplift depending on resolution, and ideally these cards are made for 1440, so it's closer to 10 to 15%. So from a 3080 to a 5070, you'd be paying significantly more for a moderate jump in FPS. Another thing to keep in mind is that these tests were done using high graphics presets to really stress the GPUs and highlight raw performance differences. In actual gameplay, most players will drop their settings down to get more responsiveness and higher frame rates. And honestly, the visual difference between high and low settings in this game isn't really huge, but the performance impact definitely can be. When you're playing on lower settings, the game becomes less GPU bound and more CPU reliant, which would likely narrow the real world gap between these two cards even further. So my recommendation, if you're already running a 3080, 6800 XT, or anything in that performance tier, I'd say the jump to a 5070 isn't really worth it, at least not for Warzone. In 1440, which is the sweet spot for both of these cards, the 5070 delivers about a 10 to 15% performance boost, but it costs almost 1.5 times as much. From a pure value standpoint, that's kind of a tough sell. Where the 5070 does shine though is in efficiency. It runs noticeably cooler and draws about half the power of the 3080. If you're concerned about thermals, noise, or long-term energy use, that could help justify the extra cost, especially in smaller builds or systems with tighter airflow. Now, if you're putting together a new build from scratch, the 5070 becomes a more compelling option. It's one of the easiest current gen GPUs to actually find in stock at or close to MSRP, and it holds its own in performance, even if it was unfairly dragged by the whole 5070 5070 equals 4090 marketing mess from Nvidia. That launch narrative set expectations way too high, but in reality the 5070 is a solid mid to high end performer for 1440 gaming. Alright, that's all I've got for this one. If you found this comparison helpful, be sure to check out some of my other Warzone hardware comparisons. There's a lot more where this came from. And if you got some value out of the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really helps support the channel and keeps these deep dive comparisons coming. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.